You think you know your family, but sometimes the truth is far worse than you could imagine. Imagine discovering that the person who was supposed to protect you was hiding a secret so dark it could destroy innocence. Tonight, you will hear the story of a mother who crossed lines no parent should ever cross. I saw things that would haunt anyone forever. Children betrayed. Secrets hidden behind smiles. Actions so cruel that even love could not excuse them. By the end of this video, you'll know the horrifying truth that one boy discovered about the person he trusted the most. And believe me, some secrets are so shocking, you'll question everything you thought was safe. Stay until the end, because the most terrifying revelations are not what you think. The family appeared to the world as if they had stepped out of a storybook. The father's easy smile, the mother's careful attentiveness, and their 10-year-old son playing joyfully on the well-manicured lawn in front of their modest, sunlit house. Neighbors waved at them as they walked to school in the morning, commenting on how perfect their little world seemed. Yet behind closed doors, beneath the polite facade of suburban tranquility, a hidden tension pulsed like an undercurrent in a quiet stream, invisible to everyone but the one whose life it threatened the most. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. The boy, Liam, had always been observant, far more sensitive than children his age. He noticed the slight stiffening in his mother's posture when she answered a phone call too quickly, the nervous glances she threw toward the hall when she thought he was not paying attention, the way her voice became cold and clipped in moments when warmth should have been expected. At first, he dismissed these oddities as nothing more than adult quirks, but the unease in his chest refused to fade, growing heavier with each passing week. One rainy evening, as the drops tapped insistently against the window panes and the house smelled faintly of wet wood and fried onions from dinner, Liam heard the unmistakable murmur of his mother's voice from the hallway. It was a voice he had known all his life, so familiar, so comforting. But tonight, it carried an alien chill. He froze behind the slightly ajar bedroom door, straining to catch the words. "It has to be done tonight. No mistakes. The others cannot know." The line went dead as she ended the call, and the phone fell silent on the countertop. Liam's small fingers trembled as he pushed the door fully open, heart pounding against his ribcage like a frantic drum. That night, sleep eluded him, replaced by an icy realization. There was something terribly wrong about the life he had once felt so secure in. The next morning, he tried to act as if nothing had happened, stuffing his unease into the deepest corners of his mind. But strange occurrences continued to accumulate, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to make sense. His mother would disappear for hours, returning with a quiet, composed demeanor, as though nothing unusual had occurred. She carried bags that seemed heavier than their contents warranted, and every time she unpacked them, Liam could hear faint, muffled sounds that stirred a terror deep in his chest. He began to avoid her gaze at the dinner table, feeling the familiar warmth of family replaced by a cold, inexplicable dread. At first, Liam tried to confide in his father, speaking in hesitant tones about the oddities he had noticed. But his father, Thomas, seemed distracted and exhausted, his responses vague and carefully neutral. "Adults have complicated problems, Liam," he would say, eyes darting away, voice low and hurried. "Things you would not understand yet." The boy understood too well. His father was hiding something, and it terrified him even more to see the hesitation in the man's eyes, the slight tremor of fear, as though he feared the truth more than Liam could. It was not long before Liam felt compelled to take matters into his own hands. One gray afternoon, he waited until the kitchen was empty, then followed his mother silently as she left the house with her coat pulled tightly around her. The streets were slick with rain, and the clouds hung low, suffocating the light. She walked purposefully, ignoring the puddles, heading toward the old industrial district at the edge of town, a place Liam had never been allowed to explore. He crouched behind dumpsters and abandoned cars, his small frame trembling with fear and anticipation. When they reached a dilapidated building, Liam's heart nearly stopped. Through the cracked windows, he saw a scene that would haunt him forever. Strangers moving quietly through the shadows, and his mother standing there, calm and deliberate, handing a small bundle to one of them. The muffled sounds he had heard from the bag at home now became horrifyingly clear, the muffled cries of another child. Liam's mind screamed in disbelief. This could not be real. This could not be happening to him, in the family he had trusted with his entire being. For days afterward, Liam felt paralyzed. The image of his mother's cold, unwavering expression haunted him relentlessly, replaying itself at every meal, every bedtime, every moment he was alone. His nights became filled with nightmares where he was trapped in endless corridors, chased by shadowy figures, unable to protect the children he glimpsed in the darkness, children who seemed to look at him with pleading eyes. During the day, the world seemed muted and unreal, colors dulled by a shadow that had crept into every corner of his life. Liam's questions were met with silence or carefully deflecting answers. When he asked his father again, Thomas simply said, "Some things, Liam, are beyond our control. Trust me, it is for the best." But Liam could not trust him. His mind, too young yet too perceptive, refused to accept the notion that the world could be so cruel and his own mother capable of such acts without reason. And so he began to observe, cataloging every movement, every whispered phone call, every late-night departure. He became a quiet detective in his own life, driven by a mixture of terror, anger, and the desperate hope that there might be some explanation that made sense. One evening, after months of silent observation, Liam followed his mother farther than ever before. She led him through winding alleys and over rusted railway tracks to a remote house hidden among overgrown hedges. Peering through a crack in the door, Liam saw more than he could bear. Children of various ages, some hiding, some crying, all under the watchful eyes of people he did not know. The mother he had known, who had kissed him goodnight and read him stories, moved among them like a manager at a grim enterprise, her smile non-existent, her eyes hard and distant. Liam felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying mix of grief and betrayal that made him clutch at his chest. For the first time, he realized the truth. His mother had been living a double life, a secret existence that shattered every image he had of home, of safety, of love. Her decisions, her calm composure, her careful planning, it all had consequences far beyond her own life, and the consequences were now tangible, real, and terrifying. Liam's childhood had been a lie, his family a facade. The safe cocoon he had clung to had been stripped away, leaving him exposed to a world of moral chaos he was too young to navigate. Yet in the same moment, Liam also recognized the complexity of what he faced. His mother was not simply a villain. Her actions suggested desperation, strategy, and perhaps even survival in a way he could not yet comprehend. The lines between right and wrong blurred, leaving him suspended in a moral twilight. He felt fear, yes, but also a strange curiosity, a need to understand why someone he loved so deeply could cause such harm, why her mind had led her to make choices that destroyed the lives of children. That night, Liam lay awake in his bed, the moonlight spilling across his room in stark silver lines, and he began to make a decision. He could no longer be a passive observer. He would uncover every secret, trace every action, and piece together the truth of what his mother had done. Every whispered conversation, every hidden envelope, every child he had seen would become a clue. And perhaps one day he would confront her, demand answers, and seek a justice that seemed impossible, but necessary. The first step was clear. He had to gather information without being noticed. He started with the old letters tucked away in a drawer, carefully avoiding detection, reading about transactions, arrangements, and trips he had never known about. Each piece of evidence reinforced what he had already suspected. The life he had known was built on lies and hidden arrangements, and his own existence had been part of a calculated plan. The moral weight of this knowledge pressed down on him, shaping him into someone older, wiser, yet painfully aware of the darkness that can live behind human smiles. Days turned into weeks, and Liam's investigation deepened. He followed patterns, memorized schedules, and began to understand the logistics of the hidden world his mother inhabited. Every small revelation brought new shock, yet he could not stop. The boy who once had been carefree, who had raced through puddles laughing, was now cautious, vigilant, and haunted by the understanding that the people who should have protected him had betrayed him. The tension reached its peak one rainy afternoon when he discovered a small envelope hidden in a compartment behind the fireplace. Inside were photographs of children he recognized, some happy, some terrified, along with notes detailing arrangements he could barely comprehend. One note, scrawled in his mother's handwriting, mentioned his own name as part of a future plan, a chilling reminder that he, too, might one day be just another transaction in her secret world. His stomach turned, his hands shook, and yet a spark of determination ignited. He would not be a passive victim. He had to find a way to stop it, or at least survive it. The first part of Liam's story ends with him staring out the rain-streaked window, resolve hardening in his young heart. He knows the truth now. He knows the danger. And he knows that nothing will ever be the same again. The weeks that followed Liam's discovery were the darkest of his young life. Each morning, he awoke with a sense of dread that weighed heavily on his chest, pressing him into the mattress as though he were anchored to the reality he could no longer escape. His mother, unaware of the boy's knowledge, continued her routine with unsettling precision. The whispered phone calls, the sudden departures, the careful packing of bags that contained secrets he now knew far too well. Yet Liam found a grim comfort in his awareness. He could anticipate her movements, predict her choices, and for the first time, feel a measure of control in a world that had stripped him of trust and safety. Liam became a shadow in his own home, moving quietly through the rooms, listening behind closed doors, cataloging every whispered word and half-spoken sentence. He kept journals hidden under the floorboards of his room, scribbling notes about times, dates, and details that might later make sense. At school, he pretended to be normal, smiling at classmates, answering questions, and feigning the innocence expected of a 10-year-old, while inside, a storm raged. His teachers noticed the change, a quiet intensity in his eyes, a distant focus, but assumed it was adolescence or a heightened sensitivity. No one could have guessed that the boy was piecing together the outline of a secret empire his mother had built in shadows. One evening, Liam decided he had to confront reality more directly. He followed his mother to a building he had never noticed before, an old warehouse hidden in the industrial sector, its windows grimy and its doors rusted shut. From the shadows, he watched as she entered and was greeted by men and women whose presence spoke of authority and careful organization. The way she moved among them, issuing instructions and exchanging whispered notes, made her seem less like the mother he knew and more like a commander in an army he never wished to meet. The sight of her calm, deliberate actions, contrasted with the fear and confusion in the children she had delivered to them, made Liam's stomach churn with nausea and anger alike. As the nights grew longer, Liam's determination hardened into something darker, a need to uncover the truth fully, to understand the reason behind these unthinkable actions. He began researching, reading stories of human trafficking, of desperate families, and of the moral compromises adults sometimes made under pressure. He noted the similarities and differences, forming theories about why his mother might have chosen this path. Was it greed? Desperation? Something more intricate, a belief that she was securing a future she could control while sacrificing others in the process. The questions haunted him, leaving him sleepless but fiercely determined. Then came the first confrontation. One night, Liam stayed up, waiting for her to return from one of her late-night errands. When she finally entered, carrying her usual bag of secrets, he blocked her path. "Why?" he asked, a voice barely more than a whisper, trembling with fear and the strain of weeks of tension. His mother froze, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, quickly replaced by the calm he had come to dread. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable, before replying with the cold logic of someone who had long convinced herself of righteousness. "Because it had to be done," she said. "Because life is not fair, and sometimes you must choose survival over sentiment. You will understand one day." Liam recoiled, hurt slicing through him sharper than any physical pain he had ever felt. He wanted to cry, to scream, to demand she explain herself fully, but the words lodged in his throat. He realized then that he could not rely on her for answers. She had built a wall around her intentions, a fortress of justification that no amount of love or pleading could penetrate. That night, he resolved that he would gather the proof, understand the scope, and if possible, find a way to stop her or at least escape her shadow. Over the following months, Liam's secret life grew more complex. He learned the schedules of the adults who aided his mother, noting when they arrived, what vehicles they used, and how they communicated. He memorized license plates, street routes, and the times of deliveries that had once been hidden behind a veil of normalcy. Each revelation brought new horror. Children separated from their families, placed in temporary custody, never to be returned. He documented it all carefully, drawing maps and timelines, ensuring that he would one day understand the full extent of the operation. And yet, amid the terror, a strange mixture of admiration and fear developed. His mother's mind, twisted though it might be, was precise, calculating, and terrifyingly efficient. One particularly cold evening, Liam stumbled upon a collection of photographs hidden beneath loose floorboards in the attic. The images depicted children of various ages, some smiling with innocence, some crying with confusion, each labeled with dates and notes. His heart lurched as he realized that some of the dates coincided with the times he had been carefully documenting her departures. Among the photographs, he saw a note, written in his mother's handwriting, mentioning him, her own son, as part of a potential arrangement for the future. The words struck him like a blow. He, too, could become a commodity in her carefully orchestrated plans. Fear surged, but beneath it, a steely resolve began to form. He would not allow himself to be a victim, and he would confront this truth with courage, whatever the consequences. At school, Liam began to notice other children whose lives seemed shadowed by secrets. A girl in his class often wore oversized jackets and seemed perpetually anxious. A boy in the playground had bruises his parents ignored. He began connecting dots in his mind, suspecting that the reach of his mother's influence might extend beyond their household, touching lives he had never imagined. The weight of this knowledge pressed on him like a physical force, yet it also gave him clarity. He understood that uncovering the truth was not merely an act of survival, it was a moral imperative, a way to confront the darkness he had been forced to recognize so early in life. The tension reached a new level when Liam attempted a closer approach to the warehouse. He slipped through the shadows one rainy afternoon, watching as children were moved through doors and into waiting vehicles. The adults were meticulous, their actions rehearsed and practiced, leaving no trace of hesitation. Liam's stomach twisted with horror, but he also noted patterns, the timing, the flow of movements, the predictable routes. Each observation built upon the last, constructing a picture of an operation far larger than he had imagined. His mother's role was central, indispensable, and horrifyingly deliberate. In the weeks that followed, Liam became a master of observation and secrecy. He used notebooks, coded notes, and careful hiding places to ensure that he would retain every detail. Every word he overheard, every movement he recorded, brought him closer to a complete understanding. And yet, amid this grim diligence, he noticed subtle inconsistencies in his mother's behavior, moments of hesitation, flashes of regret, small acts of kindness hidden beneath the ruthless exterior. These glimpses hinted at a complexity he could not yet grasp, a human side buried beneath layers of necessity, ambition, and moral compromise. The first part of Liam's confrontation with the full scope of the secret concluded one evening when he followed his mother and her associates to a remote farmhouse far from the city. Hidden among the trees, he witnessed an interaction that chilled him to the core, a negotiation about a child, conducted with calm, businesslike precision, yet punctuated with small, human gestures, an attempt at reassurance, a soft touch on a shoulder, a whispered apology. The sight confirmed the duality he had sensed. His mother was capable of both calculated cruelty and unsettling tenderness, each reinforcing the other in a dance of moral ambiguity. Returning home, Liam's mind was a storm. The image of his mother orchestrating this operation, juxtaposed with the fleeting glimpses of remorse, created a turbulence of emotion he could barely manage. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling simultaneously fear, anger, and fascination. His resolve, however, remained firm. He would uncover the entire truth, no matter how horrifying, and he would survive it, or at least understand it fully. By the end of this second part, Liam had fully entered the dangerous adult world hidden beneath the familiar veneer of home. He was no longer a child playing in the yard, but a witness to complex moral compromises, facing questions of right and wrong far beyond his years. The stage was set for the confrontation that would test every lesson he had learned, challenge every assumption, and force him to navigate the blurred line between love, betrayal, and survival. Liam's world had shifted irrevocably. The boy who had once trusted every smile, every word, every gesture of love from his parents now moved through life with a careful, guarded vigilance, measuring every interaction, every expression, every silenced word. He carried the knowledge of his mother's secret like a living weight, pressing on his chest, shaping his thoughts, and leaving him sleepless at night. The photographs, the notes, the coded instructions, they had become pieces of a grim puzzle, and he was determined to complete it, to understand fully the mind of the woman who had given him life, yet placed him in the shadow of a moral abyss. One night, driven by a mixture of fear, anger, and a need for clarity, Liam decided to confront his mother directly in a way he had not dared before. He waited until the house was silent, listening to the slow, even breathing of his father in the other room. Then, he slipped into the kitchen, his heart hammering like a drum in his chest. His mother entered moments later, her expression neutral, the faint hint of the evening's errands still lingering on her clothing. Liam's small hands clenched into fists as he spoke, the words trembling but unwavering. "I know everything. I saw it. I know what you do." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then, as though unveiling a truth he had anticipated but feared to hear, she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, yet carrying an undercurrent of sorrow he had never noticed. "You saw what you were not meant to see. You know the truth about what I do. You are my son, and yet you are already beyond me in understanding." Liam's chest constricted with a mixture of fear and disbelief. How could she speak as if her actions, the destruction she had wrought, could ever be justified? His mother invited him to sit, and for the first time, she began to explain, not with excuses, but with the harsh logic of someone who had convinced herself of necessity. She spoke of a life she had wanted, a life beyond the confines of their small town, a life she believed required sacrifices that no ordinary morality could allow. She described the children, the arrangements, the decisions made with precision and without hesitation, framing them as transactions essential to survival, to ambition, to a vision of control. As she spoke, Liam felt his world fracture even further. The woman he had loved, who had kissed his scraped knees and tucked him in at night, had orchestrated suffering for others as though it were a necessity of existence. The explanation only intensified his confusion and anger. "How can you say this is necessary?" he demanded, voice rising, tears forming in his eyes. "How can you hurt children? How can you hurt me?" She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and something he could not name, perhaps regret, perhaps pride. "Because the world does not reward sentiment, Liam. You will understand one day. You must understand that decisions are not always right, only required." Her words struck him like a physical blow, leaving him reeling with moral vertigo. Determined to confront her actions beyond words, Liam began a more daring plan. He started documenting everything, photographing notes, recording whispered conversations, memorizing routes, and tracing every interaction his mother had with the mysterious network she served. Each day, he gathered more evidence, moving closer to a complete picture. He knew that understanding was only the first step. Confronting and perhaps stopping her required courage and preparation beyond what most children his age could imagine. Yet fear, anger, and a growing sense of justice drove him relentlessly forward. One cold morning, Liam followed his mother to a new location, a sprawling manor in the outskirts of the city, surrounded by dense woods. Hidden behind a hedge, he watched as children were guided into the property by familiar adults, their expressions a mixture of confusion, fear, and resignation. His stomach twisted, yet his mind catalogued every detail. He saw how methodical his mother was, how precise and careful, how she managed every movement with calm authority. And yet, There were moments when her eyes softened, fleeting glances at children that betrayed the smallest hint of empathy, a flicker of conscience. The duality terrified him, for it revealed the complexity of a mind capable of both care and destruction. The final confrontation came sooner than Liam expected. On a night thick with fog and silence, he confronted his mother in the manor itself, where she had gone to oversee an operation. Hidden behind a curtain, he saw her prepare for a transfer, arranging details with meticulous care. When she stepped outside for a moment, he called her name. She turned, eyes narrowing, and he stepped forward, trembling yet determined. "Why?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the empty yard. "Why all of this? How can you live with yourself?" For the first time, she faltered. The mask of calm authority slipped, revealing a human woman beneath, the same mother who had once read him bedtime stories, who had comforted him when he cried. Tears glistened in her eyes, and she whispered, almost to herself, "I did it because I thought I had no choice, because the world would have swallowed me otherwise." The confession shocked Liam. He saw her as both monster and victim, a human capable of brilliance and cruelty, bound by circumstance and ambition. At that moment, Liam made a decision. He would not be destroyed by her choices. He would claim his own moral agency, assert his own understanding of right and wrong. He spoke with a clarity and conviction that surprised even himself. "You cannot control this. Not like this. What you've done, what you've taken, cannot be justified. I will survive, and I will see that this ends." The words felt heavy, almost sacred, as if by speaking them aloud, he were reclaiming the part of himself that had been lost in fear. The mother's face reflected a storm of emotions: sorrow, pride, fear, and resignation. For the first time, she seemed aware of the enormity of the consequences she had set in motion. She realized that her son had become more than a witness. He had become a force capable of dismantling the carefully constructed empire of secrecy and moral compromise. And in that realization, a tension, almost unbearable, settled over them both. In the following days, Liam took deliberate steps to disentangle himself from her influence. He contacted authorities anonymously, leaving evidence that could not be ignored, documenting everything he had learned with precision and care. He ensured that children were discovered, rescued, and returned to safer environments. Yet he never saw his mother face the consequences directly. She vanished from his life, leaving only the ghost of a memory that would haunt him forever. The duality of love and betrayal, care and cruelty, became a defining mark on his soul. Years later, Liam would look back on this period with a mixture of horror and awe. He had survived, learned, and grown into a man who understood that human beings are rarely wholly good or wholly evil. He carried the knowledge of his mother's choices, the impact on countless lives, and the burden of witnessing evil cloaked in normalcy. And yet, he also carried the certainty that he had chosen a path of moral agency, reclaiming his childhood, his sense of self, and his understanding of right and wrong. The final revelation, however, left him shaken to the core. In a letter left anonymously at his door years later, he discovered that his mother had continued her actions elsewhere, in another city, under another identity. The truth hit him like lightning. The woman who had given him life, and shattered it simultaneously, had not repented fully. The world she had once sought to control continued to bear her shadow, and Liam realized that justice, in its truest form, was neither simple nor complete. The knowledge left him with a bitter clarity. Some acts leave permanent scars. Some betrayals can never be fully reconciled. And the line between love and destruction is sometimes invisible until it is far too late. As he stood at the threshold of adulthood, Liam understood the ultimate lesson his mother's actions had imparted. Human nature is complex, morality is fragile, and survival can drive even the most caring individuals to acts that defy comprehension. He carried the horror of that childhood, the understanding of moral ambiguity, and a resolve to live differently, to act differently, and to never allow fear or necessity to justify harm. And though the memory of her face, her cold efficiency, and her fleeting moments of tenderness haunted him, he moved forward, determined to navigate a world in which the shadows of betrayal are never far, but hope and agency remain possible. The story closes with Liam walking away from the house he once called home, rain streaking the windows, the night thick with fog, and a mixture of dread, clarity, and quiet determination settling in his chest. He had survived. He had understood. And he had reclaimed his own narrative. But the shadow of his mother's choices would forever linger, a reminder of the complexity of human morality, the fragility of trust, and the irrevocable consequences of decisions made in darkness.